Winter 1957, Plainfield, Wisconsin. A quiet little town surrounded by cornfields and forest. In places like this, life moves slowly. Everyone knows everyone. Until one day, the local hardware store owned by Bernice Worden suddenly stops opening its doors. That's where it all begins. The story that would forever change the way America looked at crime. Netflix told this story in its own way, cinematic, emotional, drenched in atmosphere. But not everything we saw on screen matches the records written over 60 years ago. The beginning of the case and the arrest. The series shows Bernice Worden's body being discovered thanks to a random clue and an emotional investigation. In reality, it was straightforward police work that led officers to Ed Gein's farm. At the store, they found a receipt with Gein's name. He was the last customer before Worden disappeared. That was enough for Sheriff Arthur Schley to drive straight to his house. The farmhouse. What they actually found. This is the part that always shocks people. The series focuses on the gruesome discoveries. Human skulls, objects made from skin, masks, all of that was real. The police really did find items made from human remains. But the difference lies in how it's portrayed. In the show, the house feels like a temple of madness, a place of dark rituals. In the official reports, it was described as chaotic and disorganized. Not ceremonial, but desperate attempts to reconstruct bodies. There were no signs of cults, altars, or symbols. What we see on screen is artistic interpretation. The facts describe a disturbed man who spent nights digging up graves, trying to bring back to life women who resembled his mother. The mother, the center of his world. His relationship with his mother, Ed Gein, is one of the key threads in the series. She's shown as a tyrant, strict, religious, mentally suffocating her son. That's mostly true, but a bit exaggerated. In reality, Augusta wasn't as theatrically cruel as she appears in the show. Witnesses said she was fanatically religious, isolated her children from the world, and had a powerful psychological hold on Ed. But she wasn't physically abusive. Netflix sharpened her traits for emotional impact. Psychiatric reports describe more of an emotional dependency than open tyranny. Bernice Worden and Mary Hogan, what their relationships really looked like. In the series, there's a hint that Ed might have had emotional, maybe even romantic, feelings for Bernice Worden. It's a compelling narrative twist, but there's no evidence of that. Police files list Bernice simply as an acquaintance from the store. Nothing more. Same with Mary Hogan, his earlier victim. Gein often visited her bar, but there's no record of anything beyond casual conversation. Netflix used those hints to add emotional depth, something you won't find in the case files. How many victims were there really? That question keeps coming back. The series sometimes suggests there were more victims than Gein admitted. The truth is simpler. Only 2 murders were confirmed. The rest of the remains came from graves he dug up himself. During interrogations, Gein spoke calmly, almost detached. He said he visited cemeteries, chose the graves of women resembling his mother, and took parts of their bodies. Over the years, the media turned him into a serial killer, though technically he wasn't one. Netflix also leaned into that idea to keep the story dramatic. The trial and the diagnosis. In the series, this part goes by in a few minutes, but in reality, it took years. After his arrest, Gein was examined by psychiatrists and declared legally insane. He didn't go straight to trial. Instead, he spent decades in a mental institution, where he died in 1984. Netflix condenses that into a quick courtroom scene. Verdict, closure, the end. But the real story was messier. Ed was never found fully responsible for his actions. The hearings, expert opinions, and decisions about his mental state took years, not minutes. The myths that grew over time. What started in 1957 as a small-town tragedy eventually became a cultural phenomenon. Gein's crimes inspired characters like Norman Bates from Psycho and Leatherface from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Over time, fact and fiction started to blur. The Netflix series leans into those pop culture images, the House of Masks, skin suits, ritualistic vibes. But that version comes from Hollywood, not the investigators' reports. The Aftermath: How America Turned Horror into Legend. After the arrest, Plainfield would never be the same. Reporters from all over the country flooded the small Wisconsin town, turning it into a symbol of hidden darkness lurking behind white picket fences. Locals who once left their doors unlocked started living in quiet fear. Some even refused to talk about Gein for decades, as if mentioning his name could bring back the nightmare. But the media didn't stop there. Newspapers sold out with headlines calling him the Butcher of Plainfield. Horror magazines printed sensational sketches of the farmhouse. Within a few years, Gein wasn't just a man. He was a myth. Hollywood took that myth and ran with it. Alfred Hitchcock used it to shape Norman Bates, the polite boy next door who hides a monster within. Then came the Texas Chainsaw Massacre and The Silence of the Lambs, each taking a piece of Gein's story and transforming it into pop culture terror. The irony? The real Gein was quiet, awkward, and almost childlike. Nothing like the cinematic killers he inspired. Over time, people stopped seeing him as a real person. He became a reflection of America's fascination with evil, a dark fairy tale we keep retelling. Netflix's version continues that tradition. It's not just about what happened, but why we keep coming back to it. Maybe because stories like this remind us that monsters don't always live in castles or graveyards. Sometimes they live on the edge of town, mowing their lawns, waving to neighbors, and buying a receipt that changes everything. Epilogue: the screen version and the real story can coexist, as long as we remember we're watching an interpretation. The real Ed Gein wasn't as theatrical as Netflix made him out to be. His story is terrifying enough without cinematic polish. When Gein died in 1984, his obituary simply read, "Ed Gein died in a state hospital at age 77. No commentary. No mention of what he'd done. Today, his story is part of American folklore. Every filmmaker who tackles it adds their own layer. Netflix did what cinema does best, told it in a way we couldn't look away from. But behind that story still lie the files, the facts, and the witnesses' words. A reminder of just how thin the line between truth and a screenplay can be.